Welcome to Deep, the Health Marketing Podcast. I'm here today with Bill Veltre, the Executive Vice President, Head of Media at Deerfield. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, John, for having me.
It's great to have you. Bill, you have been a fixture in pharma for quite some time. But what to me is really interesting is where you came from before that. So, here at Deep, we like to really talk about the people in healthcare and pharma, the patients, the prescribers, and those of us who work in it. And you have a unique background that I don't think I've come across here in my podcast. You were an elementary school teacher prior to working in the industry. Is that very different? I see that and I kind of feel like, well, I don't know. I think maybe I've behaved more like an elementary school in some instances as I've done my job. What have you seen? How does that compare to what you do today?
I can definitely vouch for your behavior. No, I'm kidding. Let's go backwards, right? So now being at Deerfield Group, Executive Vice President, Head of Media, I was on the client side prior to this, working at BMS in an omnichannel strategy role as a senior director, overseeing the franchise. When I started at BMS, I started in the oncology franchise, as you mentioned. Prior to that, I was on the brand team at AbbVie. I spent a lot of time building two very amazing brands in the migraine space, both Ubrelvy and Qulipta, along with an amazing team there. Prior to that, spent all of my time in this industry, really on the agency side, working for two holding companies, WPP and Publicis. And then prior to that, I was on the partner side, actually. I worked at Elsevier. So I've been kind of in the triad that I like to think of as the most important folks in our industry outside of patients. And then before doing that, I was in sales and marketing from a content perspective at a publishing company that sold educational curriculum. And that is actually the career I had right after leaving the classroom, where I was a first grade teacher in the district that I grew up in for 32 very wide-eyed, open, and very willing to learn first graders. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. It was the first experience I really had in the professional world. But what is interesting, to your point, is that there is such a similarity to the way in which education is embedded in everything that we do as professionals. I find myself teaching every single day, whether it's my team, partners that we're working with, or clients. We are constantly on an educational journey, and it's so critically important in our industry as we evolve so quickly to provide new solutions, new ideas, and ways in order to provide best in care solutions for patients.
I feel like in some ways, first graders and adults, we don't really change at all. In fact, first graders probably are the most authentic that we are as people. And, when it's all said and done, being able to connect, with the emotion of a young, tiny person at that point, in many ways is still how we connect as adults and make decisions. Have you seen that?
Yes, 100%. I think, it's been 20 years since I was in the classroom, so it's crazy to even say that. Many of my students are adults today, have reached out and said that they remember when I was their first grade teacher, which is crazy. Uh, it's interesting how individuals have changed because of the technology we have been exposed to, though. I would say the first graders I taught really, they didn't grow up with iPhones. They didn't grow up with the technology in their hand. They didn't have iPads at that time. Our ability to engage in technology has definitely affected our attention spans. I think some of the studies I've read recently, the adult attention span has decreased quite significantly, where before it was that 15 minutes we could keep active participation. We're down to like 8 to 10 minutes now, and that's still, I would say, probably on the high end. That is something that I think about every single day. How do I continue to have engaging conversations that are short, sweet, simple, to the point, and ultimately action oriented? Because I know that the attention span of most of the individuals I'm talking to is short.
I think it also holds true with healthcare today, right? On the one hand, I believe doctors fall in that same paradigm. In fact, they probably wish they had more time to have the conversation with their patients, but they themselves are distracted. And I'd argue probably patients are as well when they're sitting in the doctor's office. When we market to them, have you seen that paradigm shift as well?
Sure. Let's call it what it is. Physicians are people. We are all the same. Our attention spans are all shrinking. But it's the convenience of having immediacy in our answers. That's something that I'm finding very interesting when we think about physician-based marketing or HCP marketing in general. My husband is an HCP. He's a nurse at the ICU in Temple, and his attention span is very short. I can vouch for that. But I also see that the content that he consumes has to be bite size. He's a TikToker, so he definitely is looking for things that are short and sweet and simple. He doesn't have time to scroll through endless emails or, content on websites. He's really looking for that quick hit information, and I think that that's true for a majority of our customers that we're looking to uh, market to. That I do think that there's an abundance of information as well. So I think that there's an overwhelming sense that physicians are feeling where they are overwhelmed by the content that they're being shown. And that also has added to our uh, evolution of looking at new strategies to engage physicians more deeply across the omni-channel ecosystem and capitalize on the areas that they have affinities towards. So a lot of what we do on the media side is looking for those ways in, and doing a lot of audience identification and learning.
So do you also find they have a variety of knowledge as well? So do you have the ability and do you feel the need to tailor messaging based off of the amount of information, A, that they can consume at that moment, but also B, that they might already bring to the table because there are a lot of different levels of knowledge that they might have?
Yeah, ideally, the goal is to be as tailored as possible. I don't think that anyone's figured it out exactly. The lag in data, our ability to turn around a touch point as quickly as we need in order to complete the story arc, right? Physicians are unique creatures. They have unique habits. They have a work life balance that's very interesting. When they're in the office, they're focused on patients, they're focused on clinical outcomes. When they're not in the office, I would say, they're looking to improve their education. They're looking to make sure that they are up to date on the caseload that they have for the next day, potentially. Physicians, I think have such limited time to engage with a lot of our messaging. We have to be tailored in order to grab their attention, but it does require a massive amount of content. And something that I learned from being on the brand side is that, there isn't always the budget to do the, variety of content that you want. So you really have to be a planner. You have to really think ahead and you have to know the audience and the story that you're ultimately positioning the product for and how that individual is going to interact with that content. And ultimately, how are you going to complete the story that you're trying to tell in nuggets, in order to give them everything that the brand has to offer that they need to know in order to recommend that brand when a clinical decision is at hand.
And I think it's interesting because we see it when we go to doctors, right? You'll step into some doctors' offices and it's extremely tech forward and everything's computerized. In fact, you log in at a computer and even talk to anyone anymore. And then there are the others that have those folders still behind the front desk, and they're pulling, they're pulling out paper, and it's like, wow, I haven't seen that in years. I think that isn't very different than some of the spaces we sit in marketing. When you look at the way different marketers, different companies, but also then the different roles that they might have within pharma, how they leverage technology and communication. Some of them are still pulling from paper files, where others are extremely tech forward. What are the variances that you've seen, and where are some of the opportunities?
Sure. It's so funny. I was just at my family care physician, and she logged on to the EHR system, and I was watching her. And she turned around and she said to me, she was like, "I don't know why this thing isn't working. I didn't have tech classes when I was in medical school." And I giggled because I was like thinking to myself, that is actually really funny because it's accurate, right? They're not teaching them how to be tech pros, when they're learning how to ultimately diagnose and treat, some of the world's, most chronic conditions. So it was a funny instance. I do think that physicians, are leaning into technology, but I don't think that there's a massive group of them that are pros. So the way that they're using technology is obviously to provide electronic health records and the ability to streamline communication for patient information, when they're sending scripts, the way that they're talking to pharmacies, etc. But I do think that there's a need for education when it comes to how to interact with content from a technology perspective and get the most out of what they are engaging with. So, whether that's video content or podcasts, or whether it's the ability to attend conferences virtually and understand how to navigate a virtual conference, as we saw many years ago during the pandemic. Physicians are really, I think, inclined to adopt that in order to make the patient experience more fruitful. And then we can't forget about telemedicine, right? I think it's kind of like that thing that everybody really wants to be really good at. But I'll say going through some processes lately, I've been able to use telemedicine platforms with some of my physicians, and it's actually been very telling, that it's a great way to communicate. It has been a great bit of convenience for them and for and also to the ability to even record those conversations and be able to go back to them after the fact. So technology is definitely rooted in a lot of what we're doing with our engagement with physicians. But again, I don't think that there's any one group of physicians that's doing it like amazing. Like, they're mastered it.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with age and where they are in their career. I look at my daughter, who's a freshman at university, and how she uses technology. I don't even use today, and I probably have more technology at my fingertips than she does. But it's just ingrained in her, versus someone who's maybe 10 years older than me, who is, at the tail end of their career, and has done things a certain way. I think healthcare providers are probably exactly the same. I also think, we see it in our business. So when we look at technology as marketers, and when we're communicating to whether it's patients or healthcare providers, um, what are the differences that you're seeing with how we are communicating as an industry, and the varying levels of use of technology to help get our message across? Because I've this is not my first industry. It is certainly the most important industry. As a marketer, I know that if I can do things better, people feel better and live better lives. So it's so important that we optimize everything and get better at what we do, because it helps everyone.
Agreed. Let's talk about next best action. Obviously, our industry has been rooted in servicing the customer at the forefront of most brands' business. A sales rep being that face and voice of the brand, that connection in the office. And ultimately building on their success, we are able to now tell a more cohesive story to a physician by understanding what pieces of the story have been told live, utilizing Salesforce mechanisms that showcase the ability to close a call and then move on to the next step, which is sharing information that would allow us to understand what part of the story the physician needs to move to. So if you've only covered through, clinical benefits and you need to cover safety or efficacy, you want to make sure that that physician is seeing that in NPP communications, whether that's an email that you're sending, or if it's a banner ad or a video or content that's contextually relevant on a website that you're doing banner advertising on. But I think collectively, the next best action engine is really about taking all of those touch points and fueling the experience that each physician is having in a unique fashion, something that we haven't really ever been able to do prior. And I think it's getting stronger in our industry, and it's becoming kind of a cornerstone of HCP marketing. And it's something that we need to move to. And I think, again, it goes back to what I said before. Physicians are overwhelmed. We cannot send them any more emails. I mean, the amount of emails my husband gets from every single partner under the sun it's astronomical. There's just not enough time to read all of that, in addition to the work that he needs to do. So I do think that it's interesting to see next best action engines in their prime right now, working well, and people making that technology work.
I think it was exciting 10 years ago to have the ability just to continually message, but now we have the ability to understand if the message is being received and then tailor that message based off of um, the success you had in getting that message out. So, because in the end, it's so important if a drug has say side effects, it's so important that the doctor understands those. And now we can do that better and confirm that it's happened, which is an amazing thing. So, Bill, you have been on both sides. We often have guests who are on the agency side or guests who are on the brand side, but you've both worked for brands as well as for agencies. So I think you have a very unique perspective in how they work together, as well as how they view their role in messaging to patients. So, what was the biggest eye opener when you moved from one to the other and how the differences ultimately manifested themselves?
I love that question. When I moved from the agency side to the client side, the first thing I learned is that clients do so much more than media. I think before I only thought that they had time for me, which was probably a selfish thought. I mean, but when I moved to the client side, I realized how much work goes into building a brand and keeping a brand sustained in the marketplace, between understanding how to position a brand and forecasting supply and demand, distribution, support program, sales force effectiveness, training, speaker programs. The collective effort of a brand team is really underrated in our marketplace. The hardest job is working on a brand. There is an immense amount of pressure to hit a forecast. It is numbers based, but behind that forecast is patience. And ultimately, keeping a brand afloat is a very intricate, team oriented atmosphere. And it requires such synchronization of so many capabilities, that I was just so blown away by the massive amount of folks that work behind the scenes that I never had gotten to interact with when I was on the agency side.
So, for those agency people who are watching now, what would the advice be that you wish you had received when you were on the agency side that now you know as someone who's been on the brand side?
Well, I think on the agency side, the question that always comes up is what keeps you up at night? Well, a lot, right? When you're on the brand side, it's not just one thing, it's probably 5 or 6 things, maybe 10 things if you're the brand lead. There's definitely a lot of pressure sitting on that side. And that pressure is uh, rooted in your ability to um, bring a brand to market, keep the brand in market, meet the forecast while being able to produce those results and talk about them from a storytelling perspective for leadership that allows them to have enough nuggets to go to the street with if it's a publicly owned company. um, I think the advice would be realize that the client uh, has time and space for you, but when they're talking to you, it's only one moment in time. And they need to be reminded. They need to be brought up to speed a lot. They're going to ask questions that are going to throw you for a little bit of a curveball question might throw you a little bit. Um, but that's because they're dealing with a massive ecosystem behind them, a lot of questions and a lot of storytelling that's needed in order to showcase the success of the work that you're doing on the agency side, but ultimately what they're accountable for on the client side.
And if I flip that question, because you are also an agency person, what would you tell a brand person how to better work with their agency?
I think that that's a really good question. It's hard because you don't want to sound too professorial, right? But at the end of the day, I would say don't forget about the agencies, right? Like there's so much value in transparency. Something that I prided myself in was always being transparent with my agency partners and looking to ultimately drive the success by sharing the goals that I was trying to achieve. When there was a mutual understanding of that, there was much more success in the work that we were doing. And there was much more understanding of the times of pressure, the times of stress, because they understood where we were falling short or where we were overperforming. Clients who are listening, I would say, hey, think about your agency as an extension of your brand team. I know that that's something we talk a lot about in this industry, but when it truly works, it is magical. You can really create additional hands, minds, ears that can work in value to or in contribution to the goals that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, I think that partnership is so important because agencies, by their very design, have a degree of velocity and scale to get things done that, if given the right information, can do things that the brand just simply can't by the nature of being a pharma company. So it really, they can feed off of each other really well if that relationship is not a vendor relationship, but is more of just an extension of the team.
You brought up my 2 favorite things. Probably my biggest pet peeve in this industry is I do not look at anyone as a vendor. I do not have transactionality as a part of the way that I strategize with clients or with partners like yourself. My upbringing in this industry has embedded the idea of partnership from the get-go. I really believe wholeheartedly that if you are all in and everyone has, some skin in the game, they are ultimately going to work together much harder, and the fruits of all of our labor will, be much greater as one versus three separate silos, right? I talk about the triad a lot. You have the client, the agency, and the partner. If you can get all three of those things to fire on all cylinders, the results are much higher, they're much more effective, and it can be seen through campaign results, through forecast meeting, being able to meet numbers on the partner side, and being able to, keep a P&L strong on an agency side.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always have been a good partner. And I can say that as someone who has been a partner in many of your spots, as well as in many of my spots, as we all move around in this industry so much. Let's talk about the many spots in our space, specifically as it pertains to channels, right? Um, we are in such a changing environment. We could talk about the changes in the regulatory environment, which kind of ties to, of course, the ever changing political environment that influences that. But then it's also media. If you look at when we started our careers, I would say there's probably half of the media, if not more, that we are doing today didn't even exist.
You ain't kidding.
And yeah, it's a crazy thing because I would argue that probably in 5 or 10 years, there's probably gonna be twice as many new items to be added to that and how we do it. So, we're in a massively changing environment. What is it that you're seeing with this environment? How do we keep ahead uh, of the changes? And then what do you think the next couple of years will look like?
Great question. I mean, seeing into the future, I wish I had a crystal ball, but if I did, I really think it's about curiosity, right? We have the ability to remain extremely curious about everything that's evolving in our world, whether that's new channels or whether that's new ways to engage patients, HCPs, caregivers, payers. There is always a new solution that's right around the corner, whether that's AI and this, new wave of information gathering that has really revolutionized the way that we are looking at information from a search perspective. Whether it's video and the ways that we can engage with one another and listen to content or view content or listen and view like we're doing now. There's such massive amounts of change with the way that we're digesting information. And I think the way that we stay up to date on that is by engaging in it, right? Don't be afraid, be curious, lean in, listen to podcasts, listen to the radio, understand how advertisers are utilizing those mediums, whether it's in pharma or outside of pharma. I mean, think about the Super Bowl. I just want to make sure that, when we think about that, that we just don't think about the commercials that ran, but think about the messages that were a part of those commercials. What were they trying to say? What was the story that they were telling? How did they utilize other channels at the same time? There's so much learning in uh, just the advertising industry as a whole. And again, it goes back to, I think, being a teacher. You have to really lean in and put your hands around it, experience it in order to ask questions, right? It generates questions like, why does it work this way? How can we make it better? Where's the benefit of using video over audio or whatever it might be? Um, I really do think that when I'm talking to my team or I'm talking to clients, a lot of what we're talking about is not test and learn. I think that that's an old school methodology. I think it's really about experience, right? Experience it. Feel what it is. Fall and really think about, the fact that it doesn't always need to work, right? We need to be able to showcase that we tried it. And I think that we're going to get smarter and better about doing that as we know more about our audiences and really where they obtain and retain information the most effective way.
You answered that in a way I actually didn't expect, and you took it in a direction that it really kind of excited me in that I expected we'd talk about technology and the channels and all the stuff that we deal with as marketers. But you really focused on how it is that people are communicating and receiving that message. And that surprised me in a very good way, because I'd never really looked at it that way. But the channels don't matter. It's it's really about the message and how people are receiving that message. And uh, you know, I see it as I talk to my daughter, who is a generation or two behind me. She does. I can't talk to her the same way. Her and her friends are receiving messages differently in their brains, and that's amazing.
Yeah. I always say that, at the end of the day, the vehicle and the channel don't matter. If you don't have a good communication strategy, it's not worth your time. You have to be able to really understand the audience, be able to really dig deep into the ways in which they're going to receive the message, and make sure that the way that you're communicating is going to land where it's the most effective for them. And again, that requires us to be extremely agile. It requires us to be, uh, you know, maybe having a plethora of information available, a plethora of creative sometimes. But it is really about being um, audience centric versus product centric. Like I think sometimes focus so much on us versus who we're talking to. And again, maybe that's the teacher in me, right? Thinking about the ways everyone learns. I think about that quite often when we're thinking about a media plan or we're thinking about a new audience, really digesting, all of the facts that we know about them, but really about who are they as people? Where's their affinities? Where did they lie?
Right, and we haven't changed much. If you think of a first grader, very emotionally reactive. Um, and if you think of a patient, and depending on the condition, right, the emotions are amplified. So we could deal with things in, our workday, and there's whatever it is, there's a degree of that. But when you're dealing with a sick child or a disease that, will change your life or possibly take it, how you receive that message and what that message tells you, and the tone and the benefit or the fear in the message or whatever it is that that message isn't being received by someone like us unless we have that condition. And so when you think about segments and in marketing, we're always talking about different ways of segmenting messages. This just amplifies it because it's segmenting a message to someone who's dealing with likely a very important topic as it pertains to their well-being.
Agreed. I mean, we work in the best industry, and the reason is because there's heart behind everything that we do. It's an empathetic industry. You have to understand the patient at the core. What are they struggling with? What barriers are they facing? And ultimately, how does your marketing, your product, your strategy help them reach a new level in their life? Whether that's giving them the opportunity to live one more day, uh, a chance to live one more day without a symptom that was, plaguing them. Uh, it is such a caring industry because of the way that we have to think about the patient at the center of everything that we do. And if we are doing that on the marketing side, it's only going to make it easier for that patient to understand that there is someone there for them that's allowing them to, gain more hope, or giving them that opportunity to again, deal with their condition and get to a solution that's going to improve their life.
You worked in the migraine category, and I think this is, a great example. Migraines are awful, but you can live with a migraine. And I think that's coming from someone who, hasn't had migraines. But when you have a migraine, living with them through that, period, as you're getting auras and all the symptoms are coming, it's not, like I said, it is debilitating. It shuts you down. It keeps you from being with your family, or doing your work. And that's who you're trying to break through to. And you need to speak to them so specially.
Agreed. Yeah. The one thing that I encourage everyone to do is when you're working on a condition, whether you're on the agency side or even on the client side, right? Look at patient interviews, listen to patient research, and let them explain their signs and symptoms and the struggles that they're going through. Migraine in general, I had never realized how debilitating it really could be until I sat behind the glass as a marketer and listen to patient interviews. I was mind blown by the experiences that these individuals were facing, missing their daughter's wedding, not being able to get up for work multiple days in a row, losing their job because they have this condition that they can't control. Uh, out of out of any of the conditions that I've ever worked in, I've learned so much more from working in migraine about empathy. It was the one condition where, I feel like, you walk into the doctor's office, you talk about your heart, you talk about diabetes, you talk about these larger conditions, and then you have this doorknob condition, migraine, where the doctor's just about to leave, and they're like, "Hey, how are those migraines?" And sometimes patients are not willing to share enough at that moment because they feel like it's not important, it's not a priority. They have to like live with it and accept all of the pain, and that's obviously why we're here, is to provide them with a solution that potentially could help them alleviate those signs and symptoms. So being able to see the struggles of a migraine patient was a life-changing experience for me, and obviously a professional changing experience, because I've focused my career on helping folks just like them.
So, what do you think are the top misconceptions about pharma? Because I think we all have had the experience in a social environment where people ask us what we do, and when we explain, "Oh, we do pharma marketing," people are like, "Oh, you mean those ads?" What do you think people don't realize about pharma, or what do you think we don't realize about ourselves that should everyone should be aware of?
I think what others don't realize is that, I mean, at the end of the day, they see and hear from the media that it's all about money. And it's really not about caring, but really at the core of what we're all doing is caring. It is a very empathetic industry. I can't say it enough. That is something that I feel is a big misconception, that, we're just in it for the dollars. But I think that while every single company, in many ways, is, profit for profit, they have to be able to generate those dollars in order to formulate and pay for the medicines that are going to help the next patient. So it is a cycle that is needed in order to generate, and evolve our industry forward. I think that the thing that we don't think about, as an industry enough, is how advanced we really are at understanding our customer, and the technology that we are using. I think that, because there's a lot of different stakeholders who are in the decision making sandbox, a lot of the technology and the evolution, that we've made over the years has gone, kind of to the wayside. And I think that I hear it all the time. People say, "Pharma's so far behind." I don't really think we're as far behind as everyone says we are. We're actually made great strides in the last several years to keep up with general industry within advertising or within ad tech. There has been a lot of solutions that have been brought to market and ultimately provided great results for a lot of brands. But sometimes you only hear about the big ones, because it's easy to talk about the ones that have all of the money and have all these big marketing spends. But there's tons of smaller or mid-sized pharma companies who are doing some amazing things to ultimately provide great solutions for patients. So
On the marketing side, we are often well beyond the rest of the industry. I've personally seen that in the start of my career in health. I worked at ComScore where there were other verticals other than health, and my colleagues would come to me in those other verticals like finance and retail, and they'd ask how we did the things we did, and we were analyzing impact of campaigns, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have that data. Like the data that you can get from claims data uh, is immense, and we learn so much from it, not just for marketing but for understanding how well the brands are supporting patients, and we do that with a degree of privacy that is higher than any other industry. So I think we kind of focus on things like HIPAA keeping us from doing certain things, but what we don't realize is we're doing such amazing things and still abiding by HIPAA, which means we're still protecting the privacy of patients in the process.
yeah, I mean, let's flip the script a little bit. Imagine if you had to work on a CPG brand and deal with the regulatory standards that were put upon. we should be rewarded for that amount of work, right? I mean, there is so many checks and balances, to your point, that are needed in order to measure a campaign, to execute a campaign. We go through such a rigorous process that I think teaches you to be a marketer more than just having, a CPG product that you can put out there and say basically anything about. It really requires you to know much deeper levels of your marketing strategy, your executional strategy, your measurement strategy. That I believe it really does formulate for a more of a master class in marketing than the substandard or lack of evolvement in our industry thinking that has happened over the last several years. We're not far behind. We're doing great work. Look at some of these campaigns. I saw a couple Super Bowl ads that, while being unbranded or being corporate, focused, were empathetic, patient forward, and really showcased how we are moving the needle for huge conditions. And while I don't work on that client, I applaud them. We are really doing great work, and we need to continue to be each other's champion and advocate within this industry and start speaking more optimistically about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think when we talk to patients, uh, research is now showing they appreciate the ads more than they have in the past, right? They're learning from them. And I think part of it is we're getting better at the message, but also they're starting to accept the message more because it's more of a common thing than it might have been 15 years ago. And the funny thing is, when we're in those social settings and people say, "Oh, you do those ads," um, you either get, I have some of those conditions and, it's helped me, or, I just don't have those conditions. And I always feel like just be thankful, but know if you do, there's solutions. And the reality of it is you just mentioned RA, which you would never would have known about otherwise. And if a doctor, tells you you have RA, and hopefully they will never do that, you'll have some information that you never had before, and you'll know that there's hope and treatment because it has been communicated to you so many times.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, think about it. The informed patient is such a unique opportunity that we have within our country, being able to market directly to patients. But it's the power of choice. I say this a lot, which is, uh, everything in life is a choice, even choosing not to choose is a choice, right? And having the ability to choose and have a say in the treatment based on the knowledge that you've obtained is such a powerful place to sit. As a patient, regardless of the condition, you have so much information at your fingertips. And to be a part of that, communication process is rewarding in so many different ways. But I think what it does is it leads people down this road of acceptance, which is we have to accept the fact that people are going to be informed and those folks need to be addressed. And their questions are about curiosity because they've learned and they've educated themselves. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is we are enabling their condition to be treated in a way that's going to provide them a solution. So we are the solution for them. So we have to be the answer, not a barrier, not a problem, not anything else. I think at the end of the day, we have to be able to drive towards the best solutions for patients.
If you will leave us with one thought, what is the thing that excites you the most about the next, say, 24 months, um, that will affect all of us?
The next 24 months are going to be about speed, our ability to drive those results faster. It's going to be the connectivity of AI driven solutions to superior, streamlined execution and the ability that we have to measure in real time. If we're able to connect all of those things, the next 24 months is going to provide higher outcomes for patients, ultimately better success rates for HCPs. I would assume better financial results for payers. And ultimately, I think all companies, all boats, all stakeholders will rise in that. And I think we're really at the center point of that, and we help to control a lot of that. So our industry will continue to propel forward, but faster. We were going to run now versus the crawling and walking we've done over the last 24 months.
Thank you, Bill. This has been a great conversation. So thankful that you've been able to join us.
Thanks for having me, John.
This has been Deep.